Welcome to the Urban Sociology course. This is SOCI 309/339. This is session 1, the concepts of sociology and urbanization defined. My name is Professor Chris Abouchi from the Department of Sociology, University of Ghana, Legon. Well, basically, what we're going to be talking about has to do with urban life. And those of you who live in the urban areas, you should have no problem understanding the thing that we're going to be talking about in the slides that you're going to be reading in detail. This is because urban sociology is just a systematic documentation of the life of the individual on a daily basis that occurs in the urban areas. If you live in Accra, the same lifestyle. You live in Ho or Kumasi or Takoradi or Tamale, the same lifestyle is basically what you are manifesting. At the end of this course, you should be able to understand the processes of urbanization as well as the origin of the urban area and in terms of the life of the individual in the city. We will begin by looking at the concepts of urbanization as well as sociology. But why do we have to define concepts? The definition of concepts is critical in the social sciences because you cannot begin to discuss any subject without having first defined it. Imagine that you are invited to a lecture in the urban area on, let's say, the family in the urban area. And as you're seated, the speaker begins by talking about the functions of the family in terms of the primary functions as well as the secondary functions, and begins to identify the impact of social change on the family. You may not be able to understand exactly what he's talking about because he has not started by defining the concept of family. For example, by suggesting that a family is a group of persons united by ties of marriage, blood, or adoption, constituting a single household, interacting and intercommunicating with each other in their respective roles as mother, father, brother and sister, husband and wife. If you heard that definition from the very beginning, you'll be able to appreciate the inputs that he's making into the discussion of the family. And we're beginning by looking at the definitions of urbanization. The urban concept can be defined from two perspectives. In other words, from the demographic perspective as well as from the cultural perspective. Demographically, urbanization is defined as spatial concentration or the agglomeration of populations in specifically defined limits with reference either to size or density. Now, what do we mean by specifically defined limits? The urban area, if we take Accra as an illustration, has its limits. For example, if you are proceeding from Accra to the north and you reach Amasaman, you would have left Accra. If you're going eastwards and you arrive at Dodowa and you left Dodowa, you would have left Accra. And if you're going westwards and you leave Weja, you left Accra. And of course, the southwards is completely sealed off by the Atlantic Ocean. So basically, that is the space within which Accra is and within which people are concentrated or agglomerated. In other words, the number of people living in Accra is what constitutes basically the demographic definition of urbanization. Now, culturally, urbanization is to be defined as the transformation of the traditional value systems of the people. When we speak about traditional value systems of the people, we are looking at the culture of the people. Basically, culture as is best defined maybe by Tyler, classically, refers to the complex whole, which includes knowledge, belief, art, morals, laws, customs, and any other characteristics or habits acquired by man as a member of society. Now, basically, if we look at the components of that culture and the folk ways basically that go with that definition, we'll find that when the villager comes into Accra, he would find that there are different sets of practices which may look very unusual to him compared to what he's used to or she's used to in the villages. For example, if a girl were to come into Accra, in a village, she's probably used to going out topless, with the boobs all showing, and the only area of her body that is covered is the genital area. If she hits the streets of Accra in that manner, a lot of people are going to think that this girl is probably insane, but she's only conforming to the culture of the village. There are many other areas that the cultural changes can occur from the perspective of the visitor or the migrant from the village. In the village, traditional people are basically subjected to the rule of the chief. That when a migrant comes into Accra, the chief is no longer responsible. The Gamanche, for example, does not rule Accra. Accra is under the governance of the mayor. So that's one way in which there is obviously a change. In terms of the religions of the people, in the rural areas, it is basically a hierarchy of supernatural entities. At the top of the hierarchy is the supreme God, the nature God, the ancestors, and the lesser spirits. That basically is what traditional religion for the people in the rural areas consists of. But when they come into the urban area, typically when they come to Accra, they're confronted with basically what is predominant, that is Christianity, and they have to conform to that. Instead of going to the shrine, they may be compelled to have to go to the church, and that's a transformation in their religious value system as well. And I want to look at the economic system, basically how is production and distribution organized in the rural areas. Is production in the farm as well as production in the rivers, which is either farming or fishing. But the migrant in Accra does not go to farm, does not go to harvest things from his farm to come and process for his food. He has to go to the shops where the manufactured products are on sale. So the major emphasis here is how do you get money to be able to purchase those things which are on the shelves in the shops. There again is a change in the value system. You look at the family system. In the villages, basically the focus is on larger families in terms of polygynous marriages. Maybe the father of the migrant is married to 2, 3, 4, or 5 wives, and the number of children are quite many. In the urban area, you can't afford to marry polygynously because you can't afford to look after all of those children because of the limitations on your income. Additionally, we can talk about education in the rural areas, which is predominantly channeled through the rites of passage, where you are taught what you're supposed to do as a young person or a married person in terms of the traditional value system. But in the urban areas, the educational system is channeled through institutions. You have to go to the classroom to be able to learn what is required as a skill for you to be able to use in the urban community. Finally, what changes is the healthcare delivery. In this case, healthcare in the traditional areas is basically herbal and psychic. But in the urban areas, if you have a problem, you have to go to the hospitals and be able to have your problems taken care of. So basically, that is how there could be a cultural transformation in the life of the migrant when he comes into Accra or any other urban area. Now we can look at the definition of sociology. Sociology has been defined from various perspectives based on the background of those who are writing. Some sociologists have identified the discipline as just a study of human social life. Others thought that it's a scientific study of society. Others have defined the discipline as a study of group life, while others think that it refers to a study of relationships between individuals. But maybe the best definition of sociology that we have adopted in this particular course is the one suggested by Maurice Ginsberg. We suggest that sociology is a scientific study of society. That is, the web or tissue of human interactions and interrelations, their conditions and consequences. It has for its field the whole life of man in society. Now, there's a need to explain exactly the components of this discussion. What do we mean by web and tissue? A web is just like a spider's web in which you have various strands. Very much so is a tissue, which is like a fabric. Like the shirt that you may be wearing, it's woven. Now basically when a person comes into a crowd, he gets into the web and the tissue of human interactions. Maybe the person comes as Kofi, he meets another person who is, let's say that Kofi is A. He meets B, and B becomes his friend. And later on, B gets to know C. C gets to know D. And through B, A is also familiar with D because D is known to C, who is known to B, who is a friend of A. That is how the interaction goes on in the urban community. By the time we are aware, you have widened your network, which is like a web because it is all interconnected. The same thing applies to the situation compared to the tissue of interactions and interrelations. Now, predominantly in the urban communities, interactivity is the predominant factor. This is because the urban area has been compared to the crucible of civilization, a place of intense and refined cultural activities where the cultural goals are actively pursued. Now, in pursuit of these goals, the individual is required to go through a number of interactive processes to be able to achieve those goals. For example, if you have an issue which is legal, you may have to interact with the police. You may have to go and report a case to the police. If your laptop, for example, gets stolen, you have to interact with the police with the hope that you'll be able to trace the missing laptop. If you have an issue which is spiritual, you may have to interact with your pastor or some other person in the ministry to be able to get some kind of understanding of that problem. If you have an economic problem, you may have to go to the bank or see a friend. All of these seeing of other people to have your problem resolved is a process of interaction. Basically, that is why interactivity is a major issue in the urban communities. There are other reasons why interactivity goes on. I just spoke about the political problem that you may have and issues relating to your religiosity and issues relating to the economy. There may be issues which are significant to your life as a member of a family, and those issues would have to be resolved as well by interaction with either your pastor in terms of his counseling or with other people who you think that may bring some wisdom to bear on the problem. Or if you have an educational issue, you have to talk to your lecturer, your teacher, to be able to resolve that issue. And of course, we're looking at the problem of health, which could be resolved if you interacted with the doctors in a clinic or in a hospital. So urban life is basically an issue of interactivity because of the assumption, not even assumption, it is a fact that the urban area is a crucible of civilization. It's a place of intense and refined cultural activities where the cultural goals are actively pursued. So you need to keep this in mind, that there are a variety of basic needs, and those basic needs are attainable only if you have interactivity with the people who are able to help you attain those basic needs.